Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte, and we have a couple of interesting trades for you ahead of the NHL trade deadline. The highlight, so at least to this point today, has been Ben Chiarot going to the Florida Panthers, but we had a couple of other deals that actually led up to that trade, one of them. So we're going to go over that today. So the first trade we saw earlier this afternoon, well, actually, this was going back to yesterday. Apologies for that. We saw the Minnesota Wild and the Colorado Avalanche make an interesting trade. Two Central Division rivals right now that are actually, there's a pretty good chance they play each other in the Stanley Cup playoffs, as potentially as long as probably more of a second round matchup, but there's still a chance they play each other. So we see the Minnesota Wild acquire Tyson Jost. In exchange, the Colorado Avalanche acquire Nico Sturm. Nico Sturm is the first guy we're going to look at. He's 26 years old. He turns 27 this May during the Stanley Cup playoffs. He'll be 27. He started off as an undrafted player. This is an undrafted prospect from Clarkson University. His first NHL season was with the Wild back in the 2018-19 season. He spent most of the next season in Iowa, playing 55 games for the Iowa Wilds. Since then, he has never really looked back since that 2019-2020 season. He has now been a full member of the Wild organization. The last two seasons, he put up 17 points in 50 games last season, and he picked up 17 points in 53 games this season. So consistently, you're looking at a 20 to 35 point player on your depth, and I think he's a really good prospect. Now, you look at his contract, he is an unrestricted free agent this summer, a UFA, making league men. I mean, he's making $725,000. So Nico Sturm is a guy that adds a little bit of what the Avalanche are looking for down the middle. He's a guy that can play there. He could kind of bounce all over the roster, which I think is a good thing, and adds a little bit more. He just adds a touch that I'm not shocked that the Avalanche made this trade. Now, what's interesting is the other side of this trade. So the Minnesota Wild acquired Tyson Jost. Now, again, I've brought this up before, but I saw him in his one season at the University of North Dakota. It was University of North Dakota versus Boston College at Madison Square Garden. I remember going to that game, and the hot topic of that game was Tyson Jost, who the year before was the 10th overall draft pick of the Colorado Avalanche back in 2016. And that college season, he put up 35 points in 33 games. That is no slouch. He was very, very good at the collegiate level. But things really started to tail off for him in the NHL. His first season, that 2016-17 season, he played 6 games at the end of his season with North Dakota. He picked up his first NHL goal in those 6 games. The following season, in 65 games, he picked up 22 points, which is impressive. And for the next 2 seasons, he would be switching between the NHL and the AHL between 2017 up until the 2018-2019 season. Since then, though, he picked up 67 points, or 60 in 67 games, 23 points in those games. He picked up 17 points in only 54 games last season, and his production has actually decreased once again. 14 points in 59 games for Tyson Jost. Now, the upside here for the Minnesota Wild is there's some potential here. He is just 24 years old. Now, this is more why the Avalanche made this trade. He is making $2 million this season and next. He will be a restricted free agent in 2023. So that's $4 million that the Minnesota Wild are going to spend on Tyson Jost. Now, for the Avalanche perspective, it's obvious, pretty clear by Joe Sakic that this is a win-now move. They get a guy that's 3 years older on basically an entry-level contract compared to Tyson Jost. Puts up similar production, but they save $2 million, which allows just that much more cap flexibility here for Joe Sakic to make more moves at the deadline. And that's what we ended up seeing because we saw the Josh Manson trade. He freed up some money here with this deal. So you're seeing the same sort of teams in deals making other deals as well. They're making the side deals to make the bigger trade. So then later, so this happened today now. We're looking at a trade between the Kraken and the Calgary Flames. So the Calgary Flames acquire Calle Jarnkrok at a 50% retained salary. Calle Jarnkrok is making $2 million and will be an unrestricted free agent this summer. So they save $1 million on cap space. In exchange, the Seattle Kraken get a pretty lucrative package here. A 2022 second-round pick that's the Florida Panthers pick that Seattle had. A 2023 third-round pick, and a 2024 seventh-round draft pick. So they basically pick up a second, a third, and a seventh. So a lot of assets there. For Calle Jarnkrok, I have to say, I like this trade for the Seattle Kraken. That is a lot at the deadline to give up as a rental. Calle Jarnkrok, a second-round pick back in 2010 for the Red Wings. Funny enough, he never played a game with the Red Wings. He was traded as a prospect. He's 30 years old, and he's been in the NHL since the 2013-2014 season. So he's been in the NHL for 8 years now. And he's been a pretty productive player. He's got 26 points in 49 games this season. So you're looking at like between 35 to 40, 45 points this year for Calle Jarnkrok. And he's played in over 500 games in the league. So Calle Jarnkrok is no rookie. He's been a part of some really good President's Trophy winning Nashville Predators teams. I think this is a great trade in that sense for Calgary. But boy, they gave up a lot. They didn't give up the first round pick, which I think is a good thing, and I think that's going to be a lot of this market. If it's a player that's a fringe, maybe is worth a first round pick, teams will say, fine, give us your second and third instead. I think that's what we're going to start to see, which actually benefits the team that's acquiring the draft picks, because now you acquire another draft pick. It might not be a first round pick, a top 32 pick, but you're going to get a second pick within the next 32 picks. You're going to get 2 picks there. So I actually think that's better for the Seattle Kraken if that's the case, that they have a second and third round pick. And in the Western Conference especially, teams are going to be wary to trade their first round pick because there's a lot of fringe teams that might make the playoffs that might not. Thinking the Edmonton Oilers, it's crazy, even the Vegas Golden Knights with their draft pick. There are a lot of teams that are still in limbo if they'll make the playoffs, so they'd probably rather not trade their first round pick. And I think that's what you saw here from the Calgary Flames as well. I think it's a great trade for both sides, but really, long term, this is an absolute win for the Seattle Kraken. So now we're heading up to the MSG, Madison Square Garden. We have the Rangers, Chris Drury making a move here with the Florida Panthers. And we would later find out, as a lot of people suspected, why are the Florida Panthers moving out Frank Vatrano and his contract? Well, we ended up getting some clarity to that later this afternoon. So the New York Rangers acquire Frank Vatrano from the Florida Panthers for a 2022 fourth round pick. So to break this one down, pretty simple. It's a draft pick for a player. Now, Frank Vatrano has been a pretty good player in the NHL in his own right. 28 years old. He's been in the NHL since the 2015-16 season. And he was a member of the Boston Bruins. He played 3 seasons in Boston and is now in his 5th season with the Florida Panthers. He has played a lot of hockey. He's going to be hitting 400 games probably by the end of this season. He is at 379. Point-wise, he's got 157 points in the NHL. That's really not too bad there for Frank Vatrano. And you look at his numbers, especially in Florida, very impressive. 39 points in 81 games, 34 points in 69 games, 26 points in 56 games last season. And then this season, he is regressing just a little bit. He's got 19 points in 49 games. So coming to the Big Apple, this is a big stage here for Frank Vatrano. His contract is, at the conclusion of this season, it will be over. He's making $2.5 million for the rest of this season as, like I said, an unrestricted free agent. So the Rangers make this trade as a buyer, but the Florida Panthers end up making this trade not necessarily as a seller, but because they were looking to move out cap space. And that's exactly what they did in order to make this trade. So the big trade of the day, very interesting, and there's a lot. I tried reading up a little bit on fans' point on this trade. What's the mood tracker for the fan bases for this one? So the Florida Panthers acquire Ben Chiarot, 50% of his salary retained by the Montreal Canadiens. The Montreal Canadiens acquire defenseman prospect Ty Smilanish, a 2023 first-round pick, and a 2022 fourth-round draft pick. Okay, so this is an interesting trade when you look at the fact that the Habs got a first-round pick, not in this year's draft, next year's draft. We've seen this happen plenty of times where teams will make that trade, and it always comes back to bite them in the ass. Are we going to see that here for the Florida Panthers? Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen necessarily. We've had some really good examples of it recently. Perfect example, the Ottawa Senators, right? They traded out one of their really good prospects. I think it was part of the Matt Duchene trade. They traded to the Avalanche. That ended up becoming a top 5 draft pick, which became Bowen Byram, who was probably one of the best rookie defensemen in the league. So you're looking at that they gave up for Matt Duchene, who ended up not staying in Ottawa. Never mind, you look at the the San Jose Sharks doing this same thing when they traded their draft pick for Erik Karlsson to the Ottawa Senators, and the Ottawa Senators ended up selecting Tim Stützle with that draft pick. So it's kind of interesting to see how teams who trade their draft pick a year from now, a first-round pick in particular, we don't know the details if that's a protected, probably a lottery-protected draft pick, but that is one to keep an eye on. And you might look back and you might say, damn, Kevin was right, or it doesn't really matter and nobody thinks anything of it a year from now. And it ends up being pick 29 or 30 or maybe even 32. So then you also get the fourth-round draft pick. I think that's good for the Habs. They get a first and a fourth. That's pretty good, especially in a pretty loaded draft class this year. That is going to be worth something for the Habs. And worst case, it even allows them at the draft floor this year. Say there's a guy they want at 18, 19, 20, maybe even later than that. Let's say there's a goalie or somebody they really like out there. They can trade their first-round pick next year with some other draft pick to get that deal done to acquire that. That is definitely going to be on the table as well. So the Montreal Canadiens loading up on the draft picks. And like I said, you look at where they're at right now. They have a lot of draft capital right now in Montreal. Let me see if I could find it here for you guys. What do we got? They also have spent the most money in the NHL. So you look at their draft this year. So they have 2 first-round picks this year, their own second, 3 third-round picks, 3 fourth-round picks, and a 7th round, and 2 7th-round picks. Next year, they have 2 first-round picks, their own second-round pick, their own third, fourth. They have Calgary's 5th as well next year. So they have a lot of draft picks in the top 3 rounds in particular. So you're looking 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So in the first 3 rounds for the next 2 drafts, they're going to have 10 draft picks. Doesn't mean they're going to draft with all 10, but that's 10 draft picks worth of draft capital for the Habs. And this is at the beginning of the trade deadline. So that's a pretty nice pickup there for the Habs. They also pick up a young prospect, a 3rd-round pick of the Florida Panthers back in the 2020 NHL draft. At 20 years old is Ty Smilanish. Smilanish has been playing with the U.S. under 18, under 17 team. And he's been pretty good. The last two seasons he has spent at the East Coast American Continental, playing in the Quinnipiac University. So, and he's actually put up pretty good totals. You look at last season, 21 points in 29 games as a defenseman. And this season, he's following that up with a pretty nice campaign, 22 points in 38 games, but definitely a regression from where he was last year. Like I said, he made the World Junior Championship team here in 2022. He didn't end up playing. I assume that's because of injury. So that's an interesting thing to look at. So basically, it was a former third-round pick, a first-round pick, and a fourth-round pick for Ben Chiarot. And a lot of people would tell you that's a pretty massive package. Now you look at what did the Florida Panthers get. So the Florida Panthers, freeing up that cap space from the Frank Vatrano trade, allows them to acquire Ben Chiarot. So Ben Chiarot's contract right now is $3.75 million. Now, half of that is being eaten up by Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens. So make that $1.75 million for the rest of the season for the Florida Panthers. He is a UFA this summer. He was a draft pick of the Atlanta Thrashers. I know that's how far back we're going, back in 2009. He's 30 years old. He's been playing in the NHL now for almost a decade. His first NHL season, the 2013-14 season in Winnipeg, was in Winnipeg for 6 seasons and has now spent the last 3 seasons in Montreal. He went to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2021 with the Montreal Canadiens and was one of the featured defensemen on that blue line in the top 4. You look at his point production, it's nothing really sexy. He had 7 points in 41 games last year with the Montreal Canadiens, but he also put up 50 penalty minutes. This season, he has 18 points. He's actually producing on a much worse Montreal Canadiens team. Maybe because of more increased ice time and stuff like that, but still, 18 points in 54 games. Not too bad. He's got 42 PIMs this year. And he's played in almost 500 games in the NHL. That is no slouch there for the big defenseman. 345 penalty minutes in his NHL career. Ben Chiarot is a perfect fit for the Florida Panthers and has probably solved what the Panthers were looking for. At this deadline, they have been tied to a lot of different players. John Klingberg, Jacob Chychrun, Hampus Lindholm. I'm trying to think of the other name. Mark Giordano. They've been tied to all of those guys. They definitely wanted to add a defenseman, and now they have added their guy. So you look at that defense right now. It's Mackenzie Weegar, Aaron Ekblad, Gustav Forsling, Radko Gudas, Petteri Lindbaum, and Brandon Montour. With this, I'd assume Petteri Lindbaum ends up going to the scratch pad. And chances are I'm trying to look at where is Ben Chiarot, a left shot or a right shot? Ben Chiarot is a left shot defenseman. So I'm not saying this will happen, but it likely could happen here. We're looking at Ben Chiarot playing alongside Radko Gudas on that second pair. Gustav Forsling slides down to the third pair with Brandon Montour. That's a really solid defense for the Florida Panthers going into the Stanley Cup playoffs. A big, tough defense. Very similar to what Tampa had last year in their playoff run. I mean, you look at some of these guys, Ekblad, Weegar, those guys are big dudes. Radko Gudas, he's kind of a grinder. He's a fighter, enforcer in his own right. And now you add Ben Chiarot. That top 4 does remind me a lot of what Montreal had last year to their blue line. So a great addition there for the Habs. It did come at a great addition for the Panthers, but it did come at a serious cost. That is a lot of draft capital and a really good prospect the Florida Panthers gave up. So guys, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What do you think of these trades today? Because I think a lot of stuff can be said about what happened. A lot of different trades, and we are just getting buttered up for what is expected to be a crazy NHL trade deadline. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again next time.